So, good morning, everybody. It's another one of these Fida talks. We've got Harry Jones with us today, who was a finalist or sort of commended artist, and also was a winner of our Animatic Awards for the fifth awards. We're lucky that he's joined us today. He was just telling me earlier he's from Birmingham, so we've got a Brummie on board.
We do, yeah.
Which is great to have you, Harry. So I'm just going to bring up your slides to show your work. Let's just share this screen. Let's bring this across. So hopefully we can see your page. Lovely. Slideshow. Okay. So this was, I guess, the winning piece that you submitted, Harry, and you were a student at the time when you submitted this piece. So I guess the first thing is explain who you are, explain the course you did and what university you were at, and also why you chose to select this award, and also the direction of it and the sort of the making of it and the whole experience.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Hi everyone. My name's Harry Jones. I am based in Birmingham. I attended Birmingham City University, BCU, where I studied illustration. So I finished that earlier this year. I graduated in the summer. But yeah, this was during my very last final few months for this award. I actually found out about Fida. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
But I actually found out about it. I think it wasn't last year, it was the year before. I think it was the third awards at the time, and it was being advertised, and I found it on Instagram as a recommended page. And at the time I actually thought it was like a scam because I thought it was like too good to be true sort of thing. Because I saw that it was a competition with all of these amazing great people that were the people that were
The judges.
the judges. Yes, that's the word I was looking for, the judges. And I was like, is this legit or not? So I actually skipped that awards because I was like unsure about the legitimacy of it.
Yeah.
And then I joined fourth the fourth awards, I think, where I got through to the short. I think I got shortlisted for that. I did like a Dior
Yes.
illustration and Scaparelli. And then I redid it again for this one, where I submitted this piece along with another animation. And I did some stills as well, I think, which were in another category. So for the animatic ones, it was a little bit of like not a last minute decision, but they came after the stills that I submitted. It was I kind of wanted to move into that area because it was something that I've not really seen a lot of people use. Like it feels quite fresh. And a lot of my work, like I've been told, and like kind of what I try to capture is like a sense of movement. So I wanted to sort of delve into the sort of animatic space with things. So this one at the time I approached quite similarly to how I would like draw like for life drawing, like figure drawing. So I was trying to be quite gestural with my marks. It is all digital, but the way I was trying to approach it was how I would use like analog medium. It was based off of actual like video footage of a Dolce and Gabbana runway from like 2010, I think it was. And then at the time, Valentino brought out their latest collection, which featured like, I think everything was just hot pink and black. And I was like, oh, that'd be really cool if I tried to sort of like incorporate that into something that looks, that was from 10 years ago, to the effect of it. But yeah, so at the time I was really chuffed with this. And then actually when I look back at it now, I know it's just all part of development, like everyone would feel the same, but like look back at it now and it just doesn't resonate with like how I want to work, if that makes sense. Which I think is good though in a way, because I've been in the position of being a student. it's all about sort of exploring different things and experimenting. And I think that's nice that there was that student category, because it's doesn't put that pressure of like the professionals that you're sort of almost like competing against, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did another animation for this award. I think that got shortlisted or got into the finals.
Yeah.
And that one resonates with me more, which is quite funny, really. And that's kind of where I've tried to sort of develop on from into my work now as well.
I think let's just check, because that might be this one. Is this the one you're talking about, or the?
No, no, it was the the white the like the woman walking across
Oh, yes,
in the
yes,
white, yeah, that one, yeah.
yes. Um, so for me, I'll step back. I'll try and get a picture of that. I'll bring up your Instagram as well.
Yeah.
But it's funny because there's an exhibition on at the moment, William Kentridge. I don't know if you looked at William Kentridge, but he does drawings with charcoal, and they're very sort of gestural. He draws on top and rubs away,
Yes, yes.
and he's got an interesting documentary on the BBC as well. And when I see this work and I see the work that comes out, the work of students is sometimes more courageous because, like you said, you feel a little bit like, oh, the pressure's not on. I don't need to refine it too much. And I feel that, and we'll come on to your later pieces, is that the more courageous you are about some of your work, the more it feels sort of artistic. It feels of the moment.
Yes, yeah.
And I guess where you feel like you need to be maybe more professional, or your work needs to be more refined or finished to appeal to what you think is an audience, you sometimes you take away a bit of what was quite beautiful. So I think it's nice to have these different techniques, and it's funny that you say that you're kind of you see this and you feel that this isn't the direction, and that's very a sort of an art approach to life, is that you say, oh well, okay, that work doesn't really work for me at the moment, and I feel that I want to make this more clean cut, beautiful pieces. So I guess the other piece is more refined and finished, but they are two different ways of working. And if you went to a fashion show, I feel that this feels of the moment, like as if you were there, where
Yeah.
the other work feels like a reaction to the show. So
Yes, yeah.
one's a response and one is of the moment. And I think that if I was looking at commissioning work, you're looking to get commissioned work, is they would both have different feelings to me, but this one really stops me in my tracks because it has all these sort of movements, and it feels quite studious in some way, but that feels quite beautiful. Because I remember when I had meetings with clients and they would say, oh, I love the smell of your work, it smells of screen prints, it reminds me of university. So you have that sort of youthfulness to your work. And my advice to you would be to persist with this and have a combination of it, be
Mm.
quite fresh. There are illustrators who have these sort of very gestural drawing, mark making, and don't have a very sort of complete piece. And you'll find that, I get commissioned work and I'm like, how have they picked it? Where did they select it from? This is the worst work.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And
Mm.
and you don't always want to be drawing or creating work from the work that you don't like anymore. But there is something quite original about what you did. And also with the Valentino pink and stuff like that, it's people will see them little sort of moments that you've riffed off like a musician. You're picking up and grasping this, and that sort of very punchy green, it's very vivid. And I think this one really worked, and I know that I know you've shifted a little bit, but I feel that I would keep parallels of different styles and techniques, and it is hard. You're going through the early bird part of your journey, and it is people want to cement a style, and I heard you talking about editorial work, and I can see in your new work how it's become very editorial like, where this work I feel could be more advertising,
Mhm.
and you
Yeah.
because it's more graphic.
Yes.
It has a graphic feel. They both would work in advertising, but this has a real, almost like poster like, Toulouse-Lautrec feel to it. So I, I I guess that's kind of a step forward. So this was another piece that you made, which I thought was quite nice. It has a sort of screen print. It really feels sort of old school when I saw it. But what process are you using to do these? Are they all on Procreate or?
Yeah, so these were both done on Procreate. But so um my process even like now still is mostly digital. But I always struggle with that kind of um that kind of barrier between you and a screen, that you don't get that same feeling as you do when you're working like analog.
Yeah,
That kind of like that sort of purity of the medium, I guess, that you can't get when you're just drawing on like a glass screen. So even though it is mostly digital, I try to sort of approach it in a way that I like. Well, I hope it gets across a more like analog look to it, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Um, so that it doesn't just completely feel, oh, that was done on a screen. It's sort of like an in between, I guess. Um, so I try to mix it up as well. This one was completely all digital though. But I tried to the way I approached it, I tried to sort of make it look as if like quite painterly, I suppose.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I was looking at a lot of sort of Fauvism, was that the right? I
Ovism,
think
yeah,
Fauvism.
yeah,
So that was a really big inspiration with the color choices for this one. And then as well, it was sort of throughout my time at uni, I was really, and even still now, um, I was really like interested in mark making. Um, so a lot of this work at the time, it was all very just mark making based. And I do still try to incorporate that into my work now, but I think it's just a little bit more refined. Um, and yeah, so it was just sort of trying to get that balance of abstract and capturing like realism, I suppose, as well, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Um, so just trying to capture that that in between, that balance.
yeah. I can see so many different elements, and it kind of, I could see this working for MTV, early MTV, and then sort of bringing back MTV to this old school retro neons. So I can see all of these graphic marks in there, and when I first left university and was trying to plan my portfolio of work, is really to consider who would commission this. That's the thing I would always be grasping with. And at college, they give you projects which are maybe, here's a brand or a brief, or let's do a penguin book cover or something like that. And then when you leave, you have to kind of think about who do I want to work for? Who's my target audience? It is a very marketing mindset. And who
Yes.
really wants this work? Who's gonna consider it? And that was sort of in my head when I left uni, and I was constantly like, and also bringing in what you're. It was funny because when I did my final project at uni, I did it about street kids, and I did it about youngsters and playing on the street, and then when I left college, all my work was about kids being abused because I was drawing kids, and my audience were looking at the work I was creating. So I was like drawing kids hanging around blocks of flats and places like that, and I was just responding to the environment. And all my work ended up with like single mums who've lost their money, and I can't remember the name of the magazines, but they were the sorts of commissions, and it was great. I was getting double page spread editorial work, quite well paid. I didn't understand resolution. No one told me. So for the first, I think, 8 editions, I was working in 72 DPI.
Oh no.
I was drawing everything by hand, but
Yeah.
I didn't know. No one had taught me about scanning,
Yeah.
so I didn't know how to scan. Like I'd scan at college, but no one told me, oh, you need to create an image at 300 DPI. So I'd go into Photoshop and just change up it, which is the
Yeah.
worst thing you could do.
Yeah.
Um, but even though all my images were made, and they loved them, they were like, we love this sort of anti-aliased digital image, and I was like, but that's not. So I'd always get the magazines back, and I'd be going, the resolution's crap.
Yeah.
What have I done wrong? And then after about eight times, I worked out I'm working at the wrong resolution. So when I taught at university as a lecturer, the first thing I taught was resolution and
Yeah.
about CMYK and which you guys might take for granted now, but we had Quark. Photoshop didn't exist. It was just starting. So I
Yeah.
think I was on Photoshop 0.2
Oh
and
wow.
and
Yeah.
it crashed every 10 minutes.
Mm.
So you'd be on there and you'd lose it. Where now when it crashes, it saves it back. Where before, if you didn't save every 5 minutes, you
Yeah.
would
It was
lose
just gone. Yeah.
it was gone forever. So
Yeah.
you had this like panic attack of how to work. And then I I got commissioned by REM to do a project for them from one of these depressing drawings that I did that were all
Oh
low
wow.
resolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a this is what happens. You kind of bumble across different work, different projects, and work that you're doing here. You don't know who's going to see it. You don't. It is really getting it out there and being involved and stuff like that. So as a student, me giving you sort of my feedback is you have to be involved with everything, and you have to earn a living, but also if you're passionate about it, you will be. And I know you are, because I know, I've seen your journey from behind the scenes. So it's quite nice to see you face to face. But it is a passion, and you're kind of doing it as a love of labor. And in the evenings, you're probably working, and in the morning, you're working, and you're working everywhere that has spare time. So I guess you're just a juggler at the moment, which is great, and don't see that as a negative. I think a lot of people feel that when you graduate from university, that it's all going to be amazing. I was
Mm.
telling you earlier that I was working on a building site while trying to pay off my rent and loans, and then trying to build my portfolio. So I guess that's the journey that you're going through, and it's great to see you really wanting to do it and being involved and acting like a professional, and it will be rewarded. I know that it will, and I know there's good things to come, and you just have to be playful and keep these sort of modes of practice going. So let's move on to these, because I quite liked. I showed both here. I guess you can explain the thought process, and it looks like how you work. I think it's quite interesting what you've done here.
Yeah. So this was an animation I did just for myself. It wasn't like it was just um like a brief I set myself just to create like a little GIF for like Chanel. So the top is sort of where I sort of quickly got the idea out of my head. So it's very like loose. It is all digital, but then I've incorporated some traditional elements. So the dress is actually like a scanned in image of an actual like smear of ink, like wet
Oh,
ink.
nice. Yeah.
So that sort of texture's coming through from an analog source. Um, and then the bottom was where like I refined it. So yeah, so it's quite interesting actually because they're both very visually different, but um yeah, that top one is sort of that initial stage, I suppose, of getting the idea out. And then yeah, I'm really into so like the kind of my kind of influences at the minute of what I've moved on to, which I think is can be seen in my other work as well, like later work, is I'm really into sort of Art Deco and that kind of whole clean cut. It's very there's almost a graphical element to it, but it's also still sort of got that like artistic shape. It's very much to do with shape, I suppose. But yeah, um, yeah,
No,
that's it.
for me, and I guess in time you'll see more or you'll learn more. Is Yeah, I look at some of the work of friends of mine who went to the Royal College, who did animation, and how they've been really how they dance between different techniques to get across the feeling. Where so the top piece has a real feeling of someone youthful, playful, and drawing with pastels.
Mm,
So if you think about, I'm the viewer now, and I don't know how you've done it. I'm just looking at it on face value, and I see it as someone here has drawn with pastels, and I quite like the immediacy of it, which I spoke about in the other work. So
yeah.
I feel that you could do small animations in this technique and really stick to this very spontaneous, almost like first approach. And you could do quite big animations with it, and it could be quite playful. And where the arm isn't correct, that adds to the beauty of it. And you'll be frightened to do that. Yeah, you'll be going, well, the proportions are wrong. It doesn't seem to work, but it feels more arty, and it feels more current, and it feels more personal and individual. Yeah. So just looking at that. And then when we go to the next one, which works, and it also talks to two different audiences. What the bottom one is more refined and finished. And it when people see it, they either love it or don't love it. And their imagination is nowhere involved because it is very there.
Mm,
Where the top one, it's quite dreamlike. It enables the viewer to be more dreamlike within the experience. So you have to think about what approach will offer in the work. And an agency might say, oh well, I prefer this because it's really finished and it sort of works. And the top one I can see, but once you start getting creative people liking your work, you have to be able to have the courage to, because that it's a suggestion. And a tutor would speak to you like that, and you would be going, well, that's a load of garbage. It looks unfinished. And I was a student, and I understand how the students think, and they're like, no, it needs to be this polished piece because in the real world, this is how art works. Well, that's not. I think it's for you to shape the audience that you want to have. And if the idea and the work, if the woman up there is falling in love with this bottle, and you create the sort of emotion of it, the emotive experience, how it's done is irrelevant. It gives me a feeling, and I think that's more important to have in your mind as an animator. And
mm,
you were talking about the difference between an illustrator and an animator. So the bottom one is illustrator, the top one is an animator. An animator is thinking about the emotive experience, early Disney, all these sorts of things. So for you, I'd be going away and looking at more old school Disney animation and old animators, how they work, and they have this freshness. And I really I love, like, for me, who is now getting older and is rebelling against normality of workflows, is I would much prefer to commission the top one than the bottom one.
okay,
That's for me.
that's quite interesting.
Yeah, so that's for
Yeah.
me personally, because I'm like, he's breaking the rules here. He's really just dancing with art. And I can think of Gauguin, and when you're talking about the Fauvists, look at Matisse, look how
Mm,
he unfolded how image making, Picasso, all them people who've gone through the Fauvism movement, and we're seeing even with Hockney, who draws in a very sort of literal way. He breaks the barriers all the time, and that's where the top one nearly wins. And I wanted to put this in because I knew it was you would probably the confidence in the top one isn't there, but it's stronger for me, even though the one below is more finished. Yeah, and there's little things that I can pick up on and go, well, I wouldn't have done this. Like, you know, the shadow on the arm at the top is too like is too draftsmanship, and it may be that it's a piece of mesh or something on her, but you know the rest of it's really nice and works. And then you become more vectorized. So you've got to work out that are you becoming a more vectorized illustrator who creates these clean cut art, and then who is that group that you're going to be going against. So then you look at who's your competition in the real world who does these sort of illustrations that are very clinical and finished, because I can see you going down that journey, and I remember going down that journey, and then you rebel quite quick. So you'll have your own journey, and I can see what you're doing, and it's quite fun to see you grappling with yourself, and that's called being a creative. So it's good, and I wanted to kind of, that's why I thought this isn't a crit, it's more of a discussion, but
Yeah.
it's nice to get, well, because a lot of people don't understand how uh, we the audience are thinking about it as creatives as well. So you're appealing not only to artists, but you're appealing to a wider spectrum of people, and we want to help educate as well, and it's a conversation. And the other thing is, you don't have to listen to what I have to say. You have to make your own opinion. And I think that's quite important as well. Is that, like, when we first spoke, you said, well, I don't like that. And that's your decision, which is good. So you have to make that firm decision. But sometimes someone will come up and give you a hug and say, do you know what? It's better to have courage and do this and push this a little bit further and see where it goes.
Yeah.
And then that creates your USP, as they would say, your unique selling point is it's a little bit different. And I
Yeah.
think so. Keep being playful. Don't be frightened. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that would be my main thing. And
Yeah.
then, you know, we move on to this piece, which I really like, and I like them all, and I think there's a real sort of a play of, you know, I can see the noise in there, and it feels quite old school, but in a very modernist way. I like the scale of it. It feels quite brutalist in that it's this big bottle and this small person. So you're playing with scale. You're really starting to think like an animator because you're using scale. And I
Yeah.
think we can tell that's really big, and this person's quite small. And then you did these lovely little washes that move around, and I feel that's enough. And I feel that these, as we spoke earlier, these would be great little GIF animations, ways of selling products, something, an area that I'm really trying to push onto you, the other members, the other creatives, to just get them to do it.
Yeah.
Because I feel, and I can't see why this isn't happening more in a store. Photography is going to become dry, and I think luxury brands, Hermes, Dior, they've always embraced creatives, drawers, people that draw. So
Yeah.
I feel, and Chanel has spoken to us about creating work, and they want drawing and they want artisans and creatives, because they need to have something unique. So let you explain this piece and what was your philosophy or idea behind it.
Yeah. So this was a piece, again, it wasn't like for anything in particular, it wasn't like a commission or anything. I just did it for myself. I had this idea just pop into my head about I've always been really interested in like perfume's quite interesting to me. I can't explain it properly what it is. I just think it's quite fascinating in how it's like advertised and presented. There's always that sort of artistic, almost romanticist, if
Yep.
it's very romanticized, and it's but it's also very simple. So I really wanted to create, something like that, and yeah, the idea popped into my head. This big bottle with someone sat on it looking into the distance, and um, it was I was trying to incorporate everything that I'd sort of developed. So this was actually not long after I just graduated. So it was one of the first pieces that I did for myself where I wanted to combine everything that I was sort of gone through in my 3 years at university. Um, so it was getting a mix of the kind of gestural kind of artistic stuff that I love and I think comes to me quite naturally, but implementing that into a more advert, like something that could be marketed, I suppose, something that advertises a product. So that's where like all the kind of gestural mark making comes in with the movement of the animation, which it doesn't show it here, but that's in the actual bottle itself. There's like the actual liquid is moving, and then her hair also moves as well, quite slowly, just sort of again. I was trying to get like the idea of like something that looked quite romantic.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was again a mix of analog and digital, mostly digital. I'd also started to learn Blender, which is a 3D program for anyone that doesn't know. Um, as So I also incorporated that. So the bottle was actually all done in 3D, and then
Wow.
what's really good with it is that you can, once you make something, it's really easy to change the viewpoint. So um that's I think that's where I think this piece works because I thought about the viewpoint of it being like a low angle looking up slightly, and cropped enough for you to understand it, but still that sort of element of mystery, I suppose. And kind of touching upon what you've actually just said with the previous stuff, it's interesting because I feel like this has a balance of, yes, it's refined, but it is also still, it still has that loose quality about it. So like the figure isn't, the figure is done in a way that is similar to the previous Chanel one we've just spoken about in the top version, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Where it's just clear enough to make out what it is, but it's not it's not like too refined, I suppose. Um, but yeah, this is probably one of my pieces this year that I'm most happy with. And then I placed it into context. So I actually put it into like the Chanel website just on top, just to see how it would look alongside the perfume they sell.
Yeah.
Um, and then also like a social media advert as well.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of stuff I want to do more of actually. I really liked the balance of everything. I felt like it felt it's one of the few pieces where I feel like literally everything I've explored has come together quite well. Like it's all mixed very well. Um, but yeah, I think that, yeah,
No, so, and I can see where you're going here. And um, if you go online, there's these new posters I think Adele has had made for her um, Las Vegas shows, and she's had these, as you said, these sort of Art Deco posters that I think there's. It's funny you mentioned that, and it's just kind of now ringing back to. I'm going through my sort of catalogue of things that I've seen, and I think there's going to be a resurgence in these sort of old posters, Art Deco, very graphic shapes
yes,
and forms, and we just have to be mindful of trends and not to be too observant of trends that you get pulled into the trend too much.
yeah,
I'm just thinking about what you were saying, and I feel that this is sort of a nice combination of a subtle combination of a little bit of Art Deco finishing, but with a modernist touch and Fauvism. So
yeah,
I think you're getting a nice hybrid of all the different things you're talking about
yeah,
and the finishing, but not to like, with the big rays of light coming out, which is very sort of, or a train in this very big perspective that you would see for a Virgin ad or something that uses an Art Deco style. So you would see that. And I remember working on a poster for the US Open, and the US Open is famous for using artists for posters. And I think there was 50 of us that created the poster, and then we went down to about 2 of us. So, and they'd all be these big tennis rackets that almost big perspectives, old school American Art Deco illustration, I would say.
Yeah.
So I feel this was a really successful piece, and I think scale's good. And I'd love to see how you could maybe, if the figure's not there, but this idea of building it in Blender, could you move around it and play with light and still have texture? So almost like something hovering around it, and you move, and you think about filmmaking in a very smart way that gives you a sense of the bottle, the shape, the environment, and like you said, how could it be used? Where could it be used? What viewpoints are you going to use with the camera? So that's quite, because you're thinking about scale. You have this wide angle lenses that could bring in with your camera in Blender, and then we have this huge bottle that you're looking up at, like as if you're a flea or a mouse, and that's quite that will be your next task for you. And I can see you're thinking about that. So you're thinking from a filmmaker's perspective now, because you're thinking in the environment. So I think this was a really successful piece, and I wanted to show this because I can see how you're moving from that space into this space for art making, and this has a very sort of classical approach. This could have been done 1920s, and it could be done now, and I think this is very commissionable, and I definitely feel that you'll get work from this, and I hope for yourself that you are enjoying the journey of making these pieces for yourself, not about me. It's more about yourself, because you're becoming quite stylized. So when you become quite stylized, you will get a sort of a set of works that will be like this for quite a while. And it would be nice to see products like the boxes that Tiffany have, and objects, and how you compose them and make it feel more contemporary and less of a pastiche of 1920s sort of image like a hairstyling and stuff like that. So how do we make this more mod? Look at the Tiffany adverts that they have over the last few years, and what is the woman, and who is she, and are they looking at different sort of collectives and genres and races and people like that? So I'd love to see this in as a group. It would be great to see this as a group, and it would be great for you to embrace what is happening in the modern context of people from different countries. I'd love to see this with Black women and African, Indian women, Asian. What does it look like? And who is this woman? And I think, and also a product point of view. So I hope with what we do, when we have a project like this, it triggers a little moment that then builds into a project, which then you now do 10 from this, and it doesn't end. And you have that sort of student approach to work making, which is I make one, but I build off from it to make a series. And then maybe at the end of the year, you say, I've created an exhibition of 20 pieces, all coming from one idea, the one project. And that's a really, because sometimes you're always thinking, what's my idea, or what shall I do next? And sometimes it's good to kind of get one thing, do it, but build from it. Don't
build on it. Don't just stop at one.
Don't just stop at one. And I feel this is quite successful, but I'd love to see it in different viewpoints and different angles. And you bringing in all of the, because that environment could move, her eyes, her eye could open, or the light could move. So how could you take this further, that the jewelry twinkles, little things that make it an animation? And now if you think of animation compared to editorial or to advertising, the budget goes up 5 times. Only from you doing some really
subtle differences.
Differences.
It's annoying actually, because I actually intended to animate this piece. So I wanted to have the calla lily's slightly swaying, just only ever so slightly. The earring piece, I wanted to animate her hand, like just adjusting the earring
Yeah.
and just the ever so slight movement in her eyelids. But I ran out of time, so I didn't manage to do it. But it is
But
stuff
do it.
it is stuff I'm thinking of. Um, but yeah, it was it's also the other thing is I still haven't I don't feel like I almost feel like I'm ahead with my ideas, but not at the same level with my process, if that makes sense. Um,
That's
so
life.
it's yeah, yeah. So it's sort of trying to break down my process and where it's appropriate to, you know, do I stop at this point as a and then move on to animating it, or uh, because a lot of I kind of work in layers, I guess. It's sort of I'm still trying to figure out and understand at what point do I stop and animate, and then what's the easiest way of working around it, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
or what do I need to remove in order to animate it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and but yeah, no, yeah. So this it was a mix again of blend. So the color lilies were done in Blender. So that again is quite that's if it's stayed in a 3D environment, it would be easier to move because obviously you've got the kind of camera movement feature.
Yeah.
But because I exported it into a 2D format, which is where I then complete the piece and the faces all put in, the hands put in, that's when I'm like, oh, how do I go about animating this now, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I don't know if it's like, do I it's almost like juggling, like do I stick in Blender or do I stick in 2D, or how can I still combine the two and still make a successful animation, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
um
I would like to see that. And I think one of the things you could do is really think about composition. So, there could be a moment where you zoom in on the hand
mm,
playing with the ear and you just recycling.
yes,
You make one animation, but it moves in on different areas like a filmmaker. So you go, let's move into the hand, moving the earring. That's the moment, like that seductiveness of the fingers moving the
mm,
earring. And then you go, okay, let's now move to the eye, and then let's show the wider shot of the whole picture.
yeah,
And then now you've got a 20-second animation made from one poster, and then that could become more of an animated poster that you've now got, which goes over a 30-second ad,
yeah,
which you've just done a few little moments.
yeah,
But that is what a filmmaker does. He
mm,
looks at the movement here, he looks at how they maybe move a bag or they move something on their shoulder. It's the subtleties, but it's just how they film it. And I think that's what, moving on from this, and I feel it, I really want creatives to do this, because if you think about it from a different perspective, which I'm always sort of complaining about to myself, is we've got Tiffany looking at this, we've got Elsa Peretti Foundation looking at this, you've got the Holston Group looking at it, who own 10 other brands. You've got Marangoni, you've got Rigo, who we're planning to maybe do something with, who is a perfume candle company. They're all looking at what we do, and they will look at this, and then if you don't see it as an opportunity to constantly tag in, connect, and post, you're wasting that opportunity. And that's the bit where maybe, me as the sort of master and commander, that's what's in my head, is there's an opportunity here that's
mm,
knocking, and you guys should be making the most of every opportunity, because we have an exhibition in Miami, the artwork's there, you've got 1,200 people running in and out of the building, you've got all these characters looking at the artwork. Being present is one element, but then you've got all the opportunities to tag in, talk to, and the Elsa Peretti Foundation, who are talking to Tiffany, and they say, oh, right, I really love this work. And now you've got a client looking at your work who you would never even know how to contact,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they're in the conversation. So for me, animating this is a no-brainer. I love the fact that you're mixing this combination of Blender and 2D, and if you could get that animation system really refined and robust, I feel that it's great because no one's going to be challenging themselves. They'll be probably trying to animate through Procreate or Photoshop, where you're now bringing in this 3D system and then adding textures to it because it has the possibilities. That is where you're using all your skills. And that is why the young graduates come through and they get the opportunities because they're using all the different techniques, different ways of working. And you know, for me, I want you to do well. I want to see this. You know, we've got the girl who was doing the 3D animation. Did you see the 3D garment?
Yes, yeah.
She's someone who applied for an award right at the beginning of when we started, and it was nothing to do with this. We were doing a digital innovation award, and I've kept her in the journey. You know,
Mm.
she's been in my package and trying to create opportunities, and she's had work and other experiences. So it is. And what was quite funny when you mentioned in the beginning was, did you thought, is this too good to be true, and is this fake? You're not the first person who said that to me, and not only did you think it, everybody thought it, the judges thought it, everybody thought, who is this thing or what is it?
Yeah.
And I guess it takes time, and there's so many scams out there on the internet, and lots of artists who contact me and speak to me. We speak online and we try and go through Slack or wherever to talk about, someone's offered me an exhibition space, and we'll investigate and interrogate as a collective to find out. And it is hard because there is a lot of scammers out there at the moment, and it's, you know, it's glad that I'm happy that we're building up this sort of genuine audience or collective, and it's nice that it will take time. It will probably take me 10 years before people will go, these guys have been around for 10 years now. they
Yeah.
they're not going anywhere, and
Yeah.
the universities are still scared to go near the competitions. Even LCF, who I've spoken to, they're like, well, still not, you know, it's still early. And I'm like, you're the only school that does fashion illustration. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And you know, we've had Leeds, Nottingham, Birmingham, the Royal College, all these schools tapping into it, getting a little bit involved. And I think over time, the illustration courses and people like that, Sunderland, you know, they're all kind of now going, wait a minute, our students are talking about this a lot.
Yeah.
There's a good response. And I hope the students embrace it more, because we're hoping to push the students as far afield as we can and get them the chances. So it's lovely that you kind of mentioned it, because I know a lot of people are nervous and like, this must be a scam.
Yeah.
you're,
Yeah.
you're not the only person, and people would message me on Instagram to ask me the same. So you know, it's one of them things, and it is early, and we're still quite new, and we're learning, and we're learning on the journey with you, and it's sort of an open, transparent space. So hopefully together, you know, and I'm conversing with you as a student, or as a graduate, because we've got Robin as well. Robin was a
Yes, Rob. Yeah, she's one of my best mates. Yeah.
Right, so
Um,
Robin has been great, and she's been really involved, and she's had some projects coming up that I've been advising her on, and I'm hoping that they've gone through. I don't know, but you know, her projects that potentially could happen are amazing. You know, these trend books, which sounds phenomenal. So I think that was. I'm just going to try and bring up your Instagram page. Let me just
yeah.
stop sharing for the moment. Let me just see, trying to find your page. Take that. Right. So Harry. Yeah, so we'll just have a quick look before we finish,
Yeah.
because I can hear my phone going crazy. And it's various people going, what's going on? So let's screen share. And I'm just going to go to I'll just have a quick peep at your Instagram.
Yeah.
So there's some great bits here. Let's see the animation. So this was the animation. So it's nice people to see this sort of swirling image in the background. And I'd love to see this as a 3D. I'd love to see how you've done it. And I'd like
Yeah.
to see you showing it in different compositions, like really small with light and then really big. They're the bits. If you've made it in Blender, you need to pursue it and show more. So I'd love to see that. There's obviously the Tiffany piece. There's you smiling, which is
There's
nice.
me.
And I saw you. I don't know if that was a real piece for the New York.
No, no, God, no. I wish it was. No, it was just like a self-directed one I did
Ah,
again.
okay, so
Um,
I worked. Chris Curry is the art director for the New Yorker,
right.
so I could send you her details.
If
And
yeah,
I've
yeah,
worked with the New
mind.
Yorker for. I worked with the New Yorker for years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did
No,
lots.
they're like one of my dream clients.
It will happen, and she's very artistic. And this was the other piece that you made. This is great. I still love this piece, and I think you're wrong to not pursue it if you're not going to. Like this approach to it feels fashiony and cool and impressionistic and really nice. So I'd love you to do more of these, and I feel there's a definite potential there. And do more. I don't know how long they took you, if they were quite quick or you were just stuck doing them. But
Yeah.
Harry, these are great. Seriously.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so do more. I could Giorgio Armani, because it has that sort of feel to it. The color palette might have to change, but they're the sorts of people that I could feel. Yeah, Giorgio Armani, Ralph Lauren, people like that for the menswear.
Yeah.
Paul Smith, I guess, would be great because of color and men's suits. I think for men's, for women's, you did that more. That the other one with the walking lady, which I think is another whole realm of itself, like Joe Malone and brands like that. I could imagine using that style, but this style is really creative and arty, and I feel that a lot of the New York and Italian brands would like this. So you'll find that your audiences will change country wise. The French will love this. They love more in the UK. No, this will not work in the UK. I doubt, because it's too creative. British people are still, from my experience, they're still too nervous to be creative. They want to be more like Google, Apple, corporate.
Yeah.
And we then, like you were saying, we go down that route, and we
Yeah.
have to think there's other countries out there. Look at animators like Mariscal and people like that who illustrate for Spain. This would work for a Spanish company, a Spanish brand. They would love it. And how do you target them? Who is that Spanish company? Zara, Max Mara. Look at them, because they would pull this up.
Yeah.
Don't target the Brits so much. Only probably Paul Smith, Agnes B, Vivian Westwood, who are a bit more open-minded with their brand,
Yeah.
and it would be nice to, and maybe Alexander McQueen.
Yeah.
The rest, I feel, would be, they wouldn't have the courage to take.
Yeah.
But that's for you. And I'd love to see the intro. How would you animate the logo of Alexander McQueen to come in to the beginning part of this? And because you're going to trigger their imagination to go, I could imagine this for us. Just repeat it. That's all it is. You're
Yeah.
doing all the right things. So anyway, we could talk forever, or I could talk forever.
No, yeah.
But hopefully, we've got to meet, and this, as a graduate and a little rising star, as your college would say, is, keep going, keep chugging away. And I'm looking forward to next year giving yourself challenges.
Yeah.
What are these challenges? And make that list heavy, and make sure that you tick the boxes as you go along. And I feel that you're going to get there. And great work, Harry, and well done. And please keep going and keep getting involved, and keep the passion going. And I know it's all there. I guess one question I haven't asked you is, why fashion?
Why
I heard you
fashion?
talk about your mum's next magazines, which is
Yeah,
funny.
yes, yeah, yeah. I've always been really intrigued by it. There's so my early one of my earliest memories is I would sit in, I'd sit down and my mum would kind of collect the big chunky next catalogs,
Yeah,
and I'd flick through and I'd always draw them. Or if I couldn't draw it, I'd be like, Mom, Dad, can you draw this for me, please? I don't know what it is exactly, but I've just always been very fascinated by it. And I've always been fascinated by it. There's always been that kind of, I mean, it's always been like that with just art generally as well.
yeah,
There's always been that sort of connection, I guess, that I've felt. Um,
yeah. I
yeah,
think for me, because I've gone down a similar route, but my mum and dad didn't do anything to do with fashion.
no, neither mine. My dad's a bus mechanic, and my mum used to be a hairdresser, but
Maybe a little bit from the hairdresser, but
maybe,
my mum never. Um, but I was when I went to university, that was really the time when I learned about magazines and ID and fashion, and I was
yeah,
always interested in fashion in a way that I didn't understand. I was interested in skateboarding and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah,
And then you'll kind of have an interest in what is the graphics on t-shirts. And I was always interested in advertising. And I guess then I didn't know what illustration was. And then when I went to Kingston and I learned about illustration and learned about drawing, and then kind of moved from there into printmaking. And, as colleges, you learn a lot.
yeah,
But within that, I was always looking at fashion. I was always
yeah,
interested in it. And I didn't know why. And no
yeah,
one in my course was interested in fashion illustration or fashion at all. They were just worried about children's books or whatever. And I think I was probably one of the only individuals that kind of went down that rabbit hole, as you
yeah,
call it. And it's been great. Fashion illustration is a tough area because there's not always the finance in it.
yeah,
And they really are selective about who they bring in. But at the moment, there's a real resurgence in fashion illustration, live drawing at events. That seems to be a massive area for people like in the field, drawing on iPads or drawing in real time. So I think there's a real space for that. But I think for you, I think animation and filmmaking and using all of your multi skills is this sort of a direction for you. So
mm,
anyway, hopefully we've had a good chat and
yes, no, yeah. It's been brilliant. It's been
conquered
great to do.
a few areas.
Yeah,
And I guess today's talk was really for other students like who've graduated like you and gone on and done well, and hopefully other students will get to see what you're doing and be inspired by you. You'd be surprised. You'll inspire a lot of students who will be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know how to do it. And it's persistence,
mm,
the
yeah,
persistence that you've got. So well done, Harry. It's good that we've met and we've met this way. And it's a shame I didn't get to see you at the awards. I know you were busy, fashionably busy. but but next year we're trying to plan the next one. So it should be an annual event now. Now COVID hopefully is not so much around.
yeah,
Um, and we'll get to meet in person. But well
yeah.
done, Harry, and thanks for today.
Thank you very much. Cheers,
Have a good
Patrick.
day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
You too. Bye bye.